My name is Kevin Bates, and I'm a pastor in Sherwood, Oregon. Each and every week, we desire to take theological principles, biblical stories, and narratives in all the genres of Scripture and help you immerse yourself in order to embody and apply them to your everyday life. I want to encourage you to tune into this online broadcast each and every week. We are here every week, and we desire to be here for you every week, giving you this material, explicating it out, and sharing our thoughts and hopefully some wisdom with you each week. So, ways you can support what we're doing is first follow our Instagram page. Next, you can like our Facebook page. And you can listen to this broadcast every week if you want. And make sure that you comment underneath the social media channels that you are listening to. And you can financially support what we do here at Resonate through our website, resonatelife.org, under the Give tab. So you are joining us live on Thursday night at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time for this broadcast, and this will be replayed as our Sunday morning broadcast at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Sunday. So every Thursday night, we come together live for this broadcast for a better understanding of the material that we're covering. So we call this supposedly a deeper dive. Sometimes we skim on the surface, but this is supposed to be a deeper dive into the subject matter. So if you are following us online, you will remember that we are in a series called Atlas of the Heart. And today we are looking at the biblical view of emotions created when things are not what they seem. The emotions created when things are not what they seem. So I'm joined today with my two very esteemed colleagues, Sharia Bodner and Jacob Flug, two of my leaders at Resonate. Good evening, Jacob and Sharia, again on this Thursday. Wonderful, wonderful night. How are you?
Hello. Doing okay.
Good.
How are you?
Good. I'm solo dad for 10 days. My wife is in London as we speak, so this is her 40th birthday present, 2 years late because of COVID. So these tickets have been pushed and pushed and pushed, but she's actually in London tonight, which is actually the middle of the night for them, I guess. But she is in
4:30.
London. What time is it there?
4:30
4:30 a.m. So she's in London right now with her mother and one of her best friends, Bethany Flug, Jacob Flug's wife, is also there. So he is also solo dad. So if you hear kids crying in the background, well,
and our
that's just where we're
screen
at.
magically goes blank.
We have to go check on the children.
some
Anyway,
point.
but here we are. Everybody, lots of people. I can tell you that after a day of taking care of my children and trying to navigate my busy schedule along with their very busy schedule, I can't imagine being 13 years old and 5 having the busy schedules that they do, but they definitely have busy schedules. I am very humbled and thankful for and appreciate and want to give honor to all those single parents out there. You deserve awards. So that's just my thoughts on that. You definitely deserve rewards for what you do and what you accomplish and how much you can accomplish. So I appreciate that. And it's days like today that I'm reminded of that, just skimming the surface, because I know there's a lot of deeper emotions when it comes to being a single parent than I ever thought about thinking about, really. So we honor you for that. All right. We're ready to get into these emotions.
Any random discussion about Neanderthals or anything?
I just read this news article about the mayor of Cornelius, and
That's super sad.
Super sad. So I read random news articles, and he was just found, and the wife is celebrating tonight. Bittersweetness, I'm sure.
The great,
she has the emotion of, I'm sure, sadness and also relief that she found her husband disappeared 2 years ago. He had early onset Alzheimer's disease. He was the mayor of Cornelius, Oregon. And he was found in the Willamette River in his car upside down, and
windows
sank
still
to the
up.
bottom 40 feet down into a river. 100 feet out from the boat dock, but they just found him 2 years after he died. So I'm sure that is, um, gosh, a bittersweetness, maybe, that
Yeah.
she's thankful, but also super sad that she lost her husband still, in such a tragic way. So,
Yeah, he had sundowners, and so when the sun went down, he went very
yeah,
active,
Hmm.
yeah,
which
he
is an interesting
couldn't.
thing.
It is an interesting thing. Alzheimer's or dementia is definitely a, gosh, the people that I've talked to that have it, and also our spouses and caretakers of those that have it. It's just a different set of challenges to walk through somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia for a long term. So some sad parts and I've heard some sweet parts too, that are interesting to think about. That like they become 25 again and things like that in their hearts and minds. So those are interesting times for the people that have loved them long term in their
Mm.
lives. That's the only random news. Nothing space, uh, nothing with space, nothing with UFOs, nothing with found Neanderthal peoples, nothing like that today.
No new
Sorry.
dinosaurs to report.
No, no. Although I did read about this cult that was.
It's in the book, though, right?
It is in the book.
Yeah.
We're going to cover it.
Yeah.
Thought that was the funniest story this week. We're going to talk about cults. We're going to talk about the church. We're going to talk about deconstruction tonight. We're going to talk about heavy, heavy emotions and what those heavy emotions can do when things aren't not what they seem in our lives, which in the last 2 years, I would say, there are lots and lots of things that do not seem what they do. They aren't what they seem. And maybe we had certain beliefs, maybe we had certain thoughts, maybe we believed in something that really wasn't real or true. We're going to cover those emotions that are caused by the things aren't what they seem in our life. All right, those emotions are: number one is amusement, number two is bitterness, number three is nostalgia, number four is something called cognitive dissonance, and paradox, irony, and sarcasm. I always thought sarcasm was bad, and I just have been just crunching over that for the last week. So you're going to have to help me unpack that a little bit, because according to Brene Brown, it possibly could have some good energy come from it. So
It's
amusement,
very, 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 very selective.
selective, yeah. Amusement, bittersweetness, nostalgia, cognitive dissonance, paradox, irony, and sarcasm. That's what we're going to cover, coming up with a biblical view of those emotions. All right, Jake's going to take amusement and bittersweetness. Let's hit it.
Cool. I think to start out a little bit, the heaviness of tonight comes from conflict, and this is a very conflicting section where you have dual emotions or dual feelings happening at the same time. And so amusement or bittersweetness, like we talked about earlier, that's like the best example. Is that I probably should know his name, he's very close, but his wife is happy that he's found, that she can put that to rest, the search can be ended, but there's a sadness of loss. And so yeah, it's the conflict. And so dissonance, the paradox, irony, even sarcasm is this push pull of emotional heartstrings that we have to reconcile and keep reconciling them. And so amusement is probably the least needed to have a reconciliation over, because it's a relaxed excitement. It appeals to your sense of humor. Amusement means deriving pleasure from your work or duty, and it's a very, very old word, but it connotates it connotates playfulness, or the incongruity, unsuspected expectedness, and surprise. And so that's an amusement when things are supposed to happen one way, but they don't happen that way, and so you get amused from that. Or another word for it is serendipity. Like Raph Brown thinks that's his name is. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. The you have is the act of surprise, and so in Scripture, I think if we go to the passage, I'm gonna put it forward there, Rob, for me. It reads, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through town. A man there named Zacchaeus, a ruler among tax collectors, was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he couldn't because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to that spot and looked...
Sorry, just had to do that.
Yeah. I also don't think you're mute on this one either, Rob. Zacchaeus came down and at once, I must stay in your home today. So Zacchaeus came down at once, happy, so I'm all distracted now, to welcome Jesus. Everyone who saw this grumbled, saying, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone, I repay them 4 times as much. Jesus said to them, today salvation has come to this household, because he too is the son of Abraham, the human one, came to seek and to save the lost. Some reasons why that...
I was trying to bring amusement.
You did. It was good.
Amusement.
Yes. There was good surprise there.
Playfulness.
Yes.
A few reasons that is a story of amusement is that story is supposed to stop you, because Zacchaeus means pure or sinless, and the thought of a tax collector is that they were the scum basically of the Jewish culture, where they were stealing from Hebrew and Jewish people and giving to the Roman government. And so they would be seen as the lowest of lows. And Jesus actually had Matthew with him, who was a tax collector. And so that's also in there. But Zacchaeus was the whole story is in hyperbole, where he climbs a tree, he's short. I'm sure if I looked up sycamore and the metaphor around a sycamore tree, it would probably point this way as well. But the lavishness of the sinner. So Jesus didn't tell him to give half your possession away. He said, I already do that, and if I cheat anybody, I give 4 times back. And so he was lavishing people, not just himself. And so the whole story is to bring out a chuckle at the religious elite.
Solid. Good work, Jake.
Thanks. Yeah. Any thoughts on that one?
Just it is a funny story.
It is a funny story. We even have little songs about that funny story.
He was a wee little man.
A wee little man. Well, I think that amusement, just the emotion of amusement, if we could talk about the idea of amusement first, is... I guess there's 2 directions that we can take when we find incongruity to subject matter or to life. So if there's something not lining up, some people have a really good ability to look at something that doesn't line up and find amusement in that. Even when it's, they go with the flow. That's a good way to put it. Sometimes it brings excitement to people, where when something doesn't line up, they get, charged out of that to find even more inconsistencies and incongruity to the subject matter. So I think that amusement that's where amusement has the danger of going toxic, where we find incongruity in someone. And then when we find amusement in someone's incongruity, And then when we start to poke at that or make fun of that or find humor at somebody's expense.
You're
And that's what I've
objectifying the
seen.
person, yeah.
Right, right. So that's where I've seen, even like in the political realm, where we make fun of people that believe a certain way. And whatever party lines you fall on, it really doesn't matter, just talking about the subject matter in general, where when we make fun of another person, we're not talking about the issues at hand or the incongruity. We're just objectifying people. And that's where then the meat of the material or the subject matter is being spoken about, or the seriousness of the subject matter then is not taken seriously. So when we make fun of people or call people names or find incongruity with what they're saying, and just name call and say hypocrite and not really talk about issues, because I could say this, that there's a lot of smart people out there, and they didn't get to the places that they have by making really dumb decisions. So they made smart decisions along the way. They were actually influential because they got people to believe in them and get them into the position that they're in. So let's say it's the CEO of your company or your boss, or maybe a politician, or even the president, or whoever you want to talk about. They got into those positions not just by accident. And so they got people to believe in who they are. So they have a hermeneutic, and they have a way of thinking, and that hermeneutic sometimes goes way deep into what they were raised with, or how they were raised, to childhood stuff, or even like just the nurture all along the way. They came up with a belief system or ideologue of ideas along the way. So it's gets toxic when we just start making fun of people in their incongruity, because even if they're not consistent, they got there somehow. And when I point the finger at somebody that's inconsistent, I probably need to look at my own inconsistencies first and say, am I consistent in this argument? If I got up on stage and debated such things, would I be consistent? I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah. I believe it was Aristotle, but I'm not quite sure. Talks about the two philosophers that all philosophy stems from. And it's one philosopher got up in the morning, looked outside and laughed. And the other philosopher got up in the morning, looked outside and cried. I think amusement is part of the laughing side.
Yeah. So in all seriousness, when you look at like the idea of this passage of scripture, and you see that this is actually a slam on the religious authority and a call out, it's actually a very serious passage. And what I find interesting is it's not just, taking light a serious subject. It's actually using more irony and, I guess, the idea of careful amusement to bring a truth to the table.
Yeah.
We don't do that today with serious subjects. We just say things and we think they're funny, and then we try to get away with them, and then we say more things to cover up our insecurity because the thing before what we said wasn't really funny, and then we say it over and over and over again, and it still isn't funny. So yeah.
I think though that like comedy in itself is a form of truth telling, that we can laugh about really hard subjects, process through them, and get to their side. And so, in Ricky Gervais, Humanity, I think it's Humanity, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Talks about how a joke isn't targeted at a person, it's targeted at a subject.
Or
and whether that
you said. Yeah.
Stereotypes, it's all stereotypes. And so, although that's a very exaggerated example, how we process big things, big ideas through amusement and emotion and comedy, it might be helpful.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And then you and I have had this discussion before, so this is not new to us. I struggle with that
Yeah.
because I think that making fun of, like using comedy to work through subject matter is a careful line to cross. And comedy has changed. Like comedy used to be back in the day, comedy used to
Nostalgia.
be nostalgia
It's coming
used
up.
to be yeah used to be like telling jokes and making people laugh, and it was slapstick, like there was slapstick type comedy,
Yeah.
which is a certain form of comedy. The comedy that I see now, that it has like it's agenda driven, and there's
Yeah.
definitely a message that they're trying to get across. So it's not comedy, it's preaching, and it should be preaching, not comedy. And they're using a platform of comedy to preach. So I struggle with that. I struggle with making fun of people from the stage. I struggle with making fun of like they like there's comedians that have no qualms of making fun of the Holocaust right now. And I'm just like that that has never been okay. Like if I got up on stage on a Sunday morning and made fun of the Holocaust, I wouldn't have a job tomorrow. So or the next day. So I think that that's a line, and maybe somebody can help me, correct me. But I think making fun of like certain subject matter or people, um, tearing apart people. Look what just happened to. It'll get you punched in the face. So, so I I don't know. I just struggle with that idea.
Yeah.
It's
Hard
not
one.
it's not
Yeah.
amusement to me, I guess.
I wonder if some of it too has to do with whether the subject is one of power or empowerment. Um,
Yeah,
I'm a little more okay with making fun of people in power than of those who do not have any,
sure.
because
The
I think
And
that's a valid
Ricky
critique.
Gervais makes fun of people not in power.
Yeah.
so you have like we'll get that in back into when we go to sarcasm, but it could also the tinge may come from they don't have the relational clout to
Yeah.
speak into people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just not a funny person, so maybe I'm just jealous.
That was funny.
Yeah, it was.
Well,
I'm just mad that people can make fun of everybody and joke around and get away with it, and I'm like I'm not funny like that. I want to be funny.
you're a good
There
storyteller.
there's a thing, Shreya, but they're not funny. There's a guy I know that I wish he would stop trying, but he has communicated very clearly that he wants to be the funniest person in the room. And he has said things like this, that that's a goal to, and he's not funny. When
When
you sit,
when
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 you
did I
sit
say
there,
that? No.
no, yeah,
Oh.
Jake, no, this is a different person. This is another person that said the same thing you did to me, Jake. No,
Wonderful.
no, he said that he wanted to be the funniest person in the room, and he's just not funny. So somebody like
That
that,
could create some amusement.
well,
There's
it
some irony
creates
there.
awkwardness in the room. It's
Yeah.
like this is awkward. Anyway, I struggle with amusement because I'm not funny. So let's go to bittersweetness.
Bittersweet. Bittersweet definitely is one that, and I think I can move pretty quick through this one, so we can go to the other ones because we've spent a half hour on amusement. But the
It's fun.
the
It's because
the
it was funny.
idea it was funny, yeah. The idea of bittersweet is that it is a bitter and a sweet, and so the best biblical story that I have is of this is in Ruth, and it's a nuanced part. And so, Rob, if you throw it up for me, it is Ruth 120, it reads, she replied to them, don't call me Naomi, but call me Mara, for the Almighty has made me very, very bitter. So Naomi means sweet, pleasant, like a good tasting wine, and Mara is bitter. And so if you remember the Exodus story a while ago, I think we talked about the bitter pool. That's where Mara is. And the whole story of Ruth is going from sweet to bitter to sweet through loss and change and resurrection and rebirth through Ruth marrying that guy, Boaz. Thank you.
Yeah.
Boaz. And so there are many examples, and I think we all feel a bittersweetness, like we talked about the mayor a little bit ago. Changes in life are all bittersweet. I think you can every change in life that we have, you can focus on things that are great, but also focus on the pings or pains of the past as well that were good. And so, like graduating out of school or moving on,
that was totally sweet.
That was pretty bittersweet for me. I think the ending.
She also gives the example of watching your students graduate.
Yeah. Watching your students graduating. There's some I don't really totally agree with that she put forward in her book. Retiring is pretty bittersweet. Coming home from vacation is pretty bitter. I'm not sure about sweet. But it's that convolution or that conflict of emotion that's inside of you when you go through different life changes. I think bittersweet always has to have a change connected with it.
Yeah, I think depends on that change, though. I think the struggle that you're having, maybe that I see, that I have maybe the same, is when you say a death of a loved one is bittersweet. Yeah. Well, it depends on how they died and when they died. And yeah, if they believed in Jesus their whole life and you know that they're in heaven and they just were a Sunday school teacher for 50 years and they died with a Bible in their hand singing praise, hallelujah, Jesus, and we just sang them into heaven. Those are pretty easy funerals to do and they're bittersweet. But if they were, murdered, I don't think that's a...
I think the sweetness comes from just remembrance of the past.
Yeah.
And then there's sweet moments in the past. I think that's what she talks about, how we bring forth those old memories to make the sweet part of the bitter.
Right.
Even if they're murdered, we have different parts that we can recall that were good.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think divorce is a weird one for me in there. Mm-hmm. Although like getting out of an abusive or toxic relationship is a good thing.
Or maybe that relationship that they just couldn't figure it out, but they decided not to be, toxic to one another and remain friends could have a bittersweetness to it.
Yeah. And in the book, How to Change, the author talks about the best way to change and to have a lasting change is a locative change. So moving house, moving a state, moving even a country or a relationship, that is the main way to have a long-lasting and a significant change in your life. So that could also be the sweetness there, but I feel like I have to dig pretty hard on some of these to grasp them.
Yeah, as long as that move or that leaving the country is done and not in haste and
with money in a suitcase leaving.
Yeah. Geographic, taking all of your addictions and abuse with you across the state. There's no change that happens there. Okay. Bittersweet. That was bittersweet even talking about that.
It's pretty bittersweet, yeah.
Goodness.
It's rough.
I guess it just depends on how much neuroticism you have. Like if you have a high level of neuroticism in the big five personalities, if you're a higher level neuroticism, which means I know that sounds bad. You're not necessarily neurotic. It's just a high level of neuroticism. So you think about, like, you're a contrarian. You think about contrarian ideas. The glass is half empty. In the Big Five personality, if you just look that up, Google Big Five personality, you'll see neuroticism, the list of the traits that are in there. If you have a high level of neuroticism, you're going to live on the bitter side versus the sweet side of bittersweet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the job of just being a human being to not walk around being, you know, a angry person or
Yeah.
a frustrated or hurt person. You got to get to that sweet side at some point and to find it. Maybe there's exercises that we can do, journaling, writing, practical things that we can do to actually get to that sweet side and not live in bitterness.
Has to do with gratefulness,
Right.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Something is that in Ruth, although she changed her name, Naomi is never called Marah besides by herself.
Yeah.
So everyone else can see the sweetness in her still.
Good. Thank you. Well, let's talk about nostalgia. That's a big topic that I think needs to be covered. The verse that we have is Exodus 14, starting in verse 11. Nostalgia actually comes from a mashing of two words that we're going to go over here in a minute. But Exodus 14, 11 through 12 says, "They said to Moses, 'Weren't there enough graves in Egypt that you took us away to die in the desert? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt like this? Didn't we tell you the same thing in Egypt? Leave us alone. Let us work for the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to work for the Egyptians than die in the desert.'" That's probably our best example of nostalgia, although that has some abuse connections to it as well, because they were abused in Egypt. So sometimes when we're abused, we go back to that abuse, which is a form of nostalgia, but also has abuse connotations. And, you know, that's
Stockholm.
where, the mental illness comes into play, and Stockholm syndrome and all of that comes into play. I think that nostalgia, the way that I want to take this topic, the direction I want to take this topic, is a very important direction, because nostalgia actually comes from two Greek words. And the first Greek word is nostos, which is home or homecoming. Home pain. So it's homesickness is what they would call it. It actually was a diagnosed back in like the
Kevin,
early,
I'll have it
yeah.
go back. Actually, if you would, right to homecoming. Just
Yeah.
start this little section over again.
What happened?
We froze for a couple seconds there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So the word nostalgia. Are we good in the tech? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. You just froze
Okay.
for a bit. That's it.
Okay. So nostalgia comes from the Greek word first nostos, which is homecoming, and then alga, which is pain. So the pain in the homecoming. So there's pain in that homecoming. It's homesickness. So homesickness actually was a diagnosed disease or a diagnosed syndrome that was called both back in the day. And so you were diagnosed with homesickness, which actually has been known to be fatal, where it can lead to fatality. When you are homesick enough, there's certain other factors that follow that: depression, neglect, some things, not taking care of yourself. Other diseases can come into play. Maybe you just, it goes into a mental illness where you just stop showering, you stop, taking care of yourself, you just stop, eating, you do, just non-typical, I guess, behaviors where you get yourself into a slow decline of physical ailment. And so it can and has been reported that homesickness leads to, or can lead, and has led to fatality. And that's where I guess it started, was with homesickness or with nostalgia. So that's what nostalgia means, is wanting to go back to home. And it comes from that connotation or that idea that home is the good place, that home was the way we raised was the good place, the place that we wanted to go to feel safe, to feel comfortable. The good old days. That's when I played. That's when I had less responsibilities. That's when I had less accountability. So there's a sequence of events, though, that I think with nostalgia that are very dangerous, because the things that we seek after, or the things that we want as our good place, there was less accountability, responsibility, and our power structures were left to be unhinged when we were in the good place. That's why it felt good. We could get away with stuff. We could just sneak out, and we didn't get in trouble. Things like that. So nostalgia actually will go into something Jake's going to explain to us as replacement theory. But that idea that we want to go back to the good place is nostalgia. I would say that this all started when, or starts, nostalgia kicks in hard when we are faced with uncertainty. When things are uncertain in front of us, where we have to make a decision, then we want to go back to the good place. When we're faced with, well, life is not the same and we have to navigate a new world, we want to go back to the good place. Jesus never called us, and I'll just, like moving off of the Exodus passage, Jesus never called us to a past good place. He called us to a future good place. So there was never a calling to a past. There was calling to a good in the present and a good in the future. So if you think about the Jesus mission.
I butt in there for a moment?
Yeah, please.
When in the gospel story, Jesus his mom and brothers come and try to take him away because they believe that he's gone insane.
Yeah.
And they walk up and they said, "Your mom and your brothers are here." And Jesus responds, "Those that do the will of God are my family." And so, although I think Jesus has a place for family, family becomes a lot bigger than just our blood. It becomes our mission to make family where we're at.
Right. So I think, it's great. I think that good place, that home that we're being called to, is not in the scriptures ever in the past. And we start jonesing for that good place of the past when we're faced with uncertainty. So the uncertainty could be like in the last 2 years. There's been people that want to go back 3 years ago. And I think about 3 years ago and I go, was it really that great 3 years ago? I mean, maybe on the surface it was, seemingly good. But when you went paper thin deep, it wasn't that good. And so life in general, probably in the last 100 years, you can't really say, oh, those were the good old days. Because we've been in conflict, we've been in war, there's been, disease. Somebody was talking to Jake today. He told me this story. I'll just say it for you, that I wish that my children would have been born in the 80s, because the 80s were just so much better of a time to live. I grew up in the 80s, and the 80s gave us really bad music. The 80s gave us AIDS. The late 70s, early 80s gave us AIDS. I mean, there was some
pandemic.
AIDS epidemic, yeah. I mean, there were some really tragic things in the 80s. I mean, there was hostages taken. There was war all over. Um, so you can't tell me that the '80s were this great time to live. Maybe we had, you know, a few more dollars in our pocket because gas was still 99 cents. I have no idea. But but to say that the '80s were the good old days is really like not a really an intelligent thing to say. Oh, but the '70s. Oh, the '70s were the good old days. Man, Vietnam. Mm. I mean, come on. So I think about like when we reflect back, what we're reflecting to is not the good old days. We're reflecting back to some time in our life that our responsibilities were less, our power was unhinged, we were held less accountable. Why? Because we were younger. Because we didn't have as many responsibilities. We didn't pay our own mortgages. We paid rent, maybe, if we didn't live with our parents. Um,
You paid
you know,
much less rent.
less rent. Yeah.
So there
So,
are some parts of it that are pretty great.
oh yeah, sure, of course. But uh, to want to go back to those days, I think that that's a form of nostalgia, that homesickness, and wanting sick to go back to those. I think that we need to go a little more than paper thin. So we're faced today with a lot of uncertainties. We're faced today with a lot of uncertain times ahead of us. Inflation on the rise. Gas prices. I just drove by a gas
Just
station, five
just like the
fifty nine a
70s.
gallon. Yeah, just like 5.59 a gallon. Those are pretty high prices. We see interest rates on the rise again. The median house prices in Sherwood are off the chain expensive. I mean, I don't even think there's a median price for a house anymore. They don't even use that terminology here right now. The lowest price is like 400,000,
In
three hundred
Sherwood,
and fifty
no.
thousand.
It's
No,
much more than that. Yeah.
400,000. I think
I
I saw
think
a house for 400,000. It was just a knockdown job. They lowered the price to 150,000 on the 600. So that one's 500,000, but it's a commercial lot. So so there's still some. Sherwood is like starting in the low 900s. It's like why 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 do we think that's cheap? I have no idea. But anyway, so things are on the rise, and it seems like that 3 years ago things were better. Um, I don't know if things are better, and I'm not sure that we can go back to a certain time in our current age and actually have them be better. It has to do with age time theory, where we go back in our age, and the time theory that we have, that the '80s, the '90s, our responsibility loads and factors were much different back then. But we have this replacement theory that I think that nostalgia actually can lead us to dangerous places. And so go ahead quickly, Jake, and just explain replacement theory really quick.
um the idea of replacement theory is that I think you haven't gotten into the white supremacy part of
Not yet.
nostalgia
I
yet,
was going. I
Kevin.
was going to, but go ahead.
Here we
So
go.
so nostalgia points back to what we thought was a better time. And so what you're seeing in the media a lot right now is that this idea of replacement theory, that um, the liberal agenda or the democratic agenda is to saturate the population with immigrants and people of color, so that the white person will become extinct in a matter of years based on birth rate, especially in the United States. It comes from France actually, so it
Yeah.
does not originate here. There was a author in France that actually brought it up again in a few different times, and so um, it's not just the problem is not just here, but we are just seeing that the replacement theory or the great replacements called being reverberated or enumerated all over media right now. And so, like, there's a certain media outlet that's being hit pretty hard with that at the moment. A previous politician that would speak that often, how immigrants coming in are like rapists and murderers, and so that is the basis of uh, xenophobia or like fear of other people, fear of people of color. And so the Buffalo, New York shooting, that person was very involved in replacement theory, a lot, and so they're believing that one of the main causes of that shooting was the idea of replacement theory, which the nostalgia or the opposite of replacement, and the motto is to secure a future that is safe and good for our white children.
That's, I guess, how nostalgia ends up being toxic and culturally toxic, and has to do with specifically white supremacy. Um, here's kind of a narrative that I want to talk through. This is what is spoken, and then there's things that are not spoken. So what is spoken is, I wish things were the way they used to be in the good old days. Seemingly harmless. Seemingly that's something that lots of people have said. There's songs written like that, right? But when it comes to white supremacy, this is what's not said. When people knew their places. So that's what's not said in a white supremacist attitude. What's not spoken also is when there was no accountability for the way my behaviors affected other people. So I think that's a general not spoken too. When we want to go back to the good old days, maybe we wouldn't be having a white supremacist, like idea or thought pattern. But every time we want to go back to nostalgia, we also have when there was no accountability for my behavior, how it affected other people. So that is a common thing for lots of people. But in a white supremacy narrative, we see good old days. I want the good old days when people knew their places, when there was no accountability for the way my behaviors affected other people. And then what's not spoken, when we ignored other people's pain if it caused us discomfort. And what's also not spoken, when my authority was absolute and never challenged. So ultimately, that is the narrative of nostalgia. How it's played out in white supremacy is when somebody of power or usurping power over another, that is how that plays out in a white supremacist mind and attitude and cultural issue, cultural makeup of white supremacy. So replacement theory, Jake, there's a lot of white people that are afraid. That's what the whole book White Fragility is all about, is we're fragile people because we have held positions of power. And when that is threatened, we're afraid that power is going to be taken away and we're not going to be in power anymore, even if we don't even seemingly have, in our minds, much power. I just was listening to a speaker the other day that would say, everything I just said right there is a bunch of crap. That's what he said. Everything that I just said right there was a bunch of crap. A middle-aged white male like myself saying that back to what I just said. And so he didn't believe in white supremacy. He didn't believe in racial discrimination. He didn't believe in any of it. And he also didn't believe in replacement theory. So
he believes in replacement theory. He just doesn't know what it is.
Right.
He believes that he is being replaced.
Right. He believes that he's being replaced, but he doesn't believe he's a white supremacist.
Correct. And so like
Yeah.
like replacement theory is not grounded in anti racism. It's actually grounded in racism.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so it's pretty, like, if you go deeper into it, it's a pretty gross assessment of culture.
Yes, it is. It is. So nostalgia also has affected not only our culture, but I think culture in a sense reflects a lot in the church and the church in the culture. So nostalgia has affected the church, and I've been thinking about this really all day today. How it's affected the church. I remember people saying the words "the good old days" in the church, and how we needed to go back to the good old days of the church. What when like we were like, what are the good old days? Like the first
When we
100
didn't
years
have drum sets.
when we didn't have drum sets, or are we going way back, like when we were persecuted and murdered on the shores? Um,
Or
I'm
when
not
we were
sure.
killing our own people because of different
Right.
ideas.
I just don't know, like what the
The
good old
Crusades,
days.
those were the good old days.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what the good old days of the church were, but I think what they're talking about is like the 1950s, the
Apartheid.
1960s of American, like
So,
middle class church.
yeah, the same good old days that we're talking about in politics.
Right. Right.
It's the 50s.
Right. So I think that the good old days of the church, that's when we sang hymns, that's where everyone fell in line. That's where when
Are you still active, Shrey?
Yeah,
Okay.
did we are we
Lost
active?
Kevin's
you
lying.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we have an internet issue again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. But let's just continue on. Am I lagging still?
You're lagging, yep.
Not
A
right
little
now.
bit?
But you're fine.
Okay. All right. So let's just try to get through the nostalgia piece. So the nostalgia piece in the church, I think, has affected us because we are now unable to navigate uncertainty as the church. And that's where that's where we've gotten really anti-missional, I guess, as a church. Our mission is to be in the world and not of it. And being in the world means that we navigate uncertainty, we navigate new challenges, we navigate through new issues, new ideas, new thoughts, new invention, new creativity. We navigate through new. And we are new creations in this new world. And we're to navigate the new world and with our new creation. So I think that the idea of nostalgia is such a strong emotional response to change and especially uncertainty, that it's really this idea of nostalgia has held us back as a church tremendously. It's like held our feet to the ground in cement, and it's been dangerous for the church. It's really caused churches to close by
Yeah.
just exponential numbers.
And I feel like church nostalgia with um, with theology, the we only hold on to the things that give us more control. And so, even though those may be very new theologies, like if we talk about rapture or the end times or um, inerrancy of scripture, those are all very like new in terms of theologies. Those are all come out of either the 16 1700s or earlier. um, but they give us complete control, and they give us to be let us have the main voice on the end. And so in that nostalgia, we're giving up the things of the past that we should have good nostalgia over so that we could have control of home.
Yeah. I would say that back in the day, the church thought that smoking was illegal, like evil, right? It was illegal for the church to people to participate in smoking, right? And then we kind of loosened the belt on smoking, and the church has always struggled with like substances and addiction and what to do with mental illness and what to do with things that seem of the world we don't know what to do with. And so we stop talking about it, or we just call it illegal for the church. Not illegal.
Off limits.
Off limits. That is off limits for the church. We don't talk about it. We don't engage with it. And used to be dancing. You know, we couldn't
Playing
dance because playing cards was an issue. Couldn't play poker night.
Zippers on women.
In the front, especially. It had to be on the side. Couldn't be in the
Women's
front.
clothes.
Yeah, women's clothes in general. And
Leggings.
earrings and makeup and all of that.
Women.
Yes, women in general, and what the church has done with women. So we've struggled with and putting things off limits to the point that we haven't been able to navigate a world. We haven't even been in it. Not of it, we haven't even been in it. So we didn't used to not know what to do with the smoker. You know, like what do you do with the smoker? Right? That was back in the day. Well, they can smoke out back, and then nobody wanted to go out back. Oh, you smoke? I mean, I knew an elder. He couldn't be an elder anymore because he smoked. And I said, well, you know, my dad smoked for a long time, so I'm pretty used to it. But honestly, so then like drinking has been an issue with the church for a long time, and not knowing what to do with drinking, not knowing what to do with addiction, not knowing what to do with substances in general. Now we have legalized pot. So the church has not dealt or navigated addiction or substance use at all. So now we don't know what to do with the changing world with the legalization of pot. So take it farther. We haven't known what to do with, you know, any relationship besides married male and female. That's all we've been able to deal with. Every other kind of. Yeah, not even hitting the mark on that at all. Okay, so let's put it this way. The church has never known what to do with relationships, right? So we've made a declaration about marriage, but we haven't done a good job in navigating marriage. The church has never known what to do with divorced people. The church has never known what to do with married twice people. The church has never known what to do with, well, if you were married 4 times, whoa, you know, not knowing what to do with the 4th time marriage. We've never known what to do with single people. And we now, in this navigating world, in the last, however many decades now, we haven't known what to do with gay people, LGBTQ+. Now we don't know what to do with trans. We don't know what to do with people. So that's my charge to the church when it comes to the idea of nostalgia. We have an ever-changing world around us, and we need to get good at this being a new creation in a new world. And what do we do? How do we navigate uncertainty? And how do we navigate an ever-changing, facing dilemmas and new challenges and new thoughts and new creativity, new ideas that are being thrown our way, and give a Jesus response and not go back to the 1950s or 60s or 1980s and say, oh, I wish that, you know, we were the church of the 1980s. That just makes no sense to me why that's even. So I think that this emotion of nostalgia has held the church back for so long. It's been very toxic to the church. And I think that it's just a yearning that we have that we didn't have to address these things. It was a yearning.
We didn't have that responsibility. Culture was addressing it for us, so we never had to address it.
Yeah. I mean, think about how culture addressed gay people. Like back in the day, it was illegal. So we didn't have to, the church didn't have to deal with it, and
I mean, a lot of that was driven,
address it.
A lot of that was driven by the church, but it was performed via government.
Right. I mean, at what point, and I'm going to just throw this out here because this is the Roe v. Wade abortion conversation and dilemma and conflict. The church has never, ever, I would say there's been moments, but the church has never been good at navigating and what to do with abandoned babies, pregnant moms out of wedlock. Like what has the church done? The church has paraded them on stages and kicked them out. That's what we've done. So,
but the men can stay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So the tragedy here is we are pro-life to a point, and that's really upsetting to me because I have 2 adopted children, and my adopted children. I'm very thankful that I had children through adoption, but it was one way that I was in my life felt called to address this issue of abandonment and moms who decided to give over their children to adoption, that I could be one of those people that could step forward and adopt children. I just felt called to do that. Not everybody does. But I think that the church needs to navigate and begin to navigate what to do with men and women who get pregnant and the men who impregnate them. I think we need to address that as the church and learn through love and care. I mean, honestly, are we going to provide services and care for women that are going to carry babies to full term? Is the church going to step up and provide that care? Are we going to provide the health care and provide the house care, provide the money that it's going to take for her to take the time off of work? Are we going to step up to the plate?
Not for just pregnancy though, for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right, yes.
And that's the hardship, is that we are only pro zygote.
Earth.
I wouldn't even say fetus. We're only pro zygote. We are not pro birth. We're not pro, because we would have systems in place that helped healthcare costs, and we aren't pro birth because we don't have systems set up to handle or help the people get to the hospital. We're not pro baby because it ends and there's hardly any support at that point. And then you create this system where, okay, now this person's going to be on welfare because you have said to this person that they can't make that decision, which I don't know or don't think that anyone has ever really wanted an abortion in their life. That's not plan A, right?
Well, I can't speak to that because I'm a middle-aged white male, and you're now a middle-aged white male, Jake. So
I'm a middle-aged white male.
So Sharia, you've had 2 middle-aged white males. Yeah, so please.
Speculative point, but I would agree. I don't think that's ever plan A.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that being plan A, and maybe for a selective percentage.
No, I'm
Maybe
saying
for
plan A is to get pregnant in order to have a.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I don't
That's
think
what
that's
plan. That's what plan
yeah.
A is for. Is what I'm
No.
saying.
No.
But I would probably debate. Sharia, please help me with this, with my language. I would debate that even when a woman gets pregnant, maybe that getting an abortion, there's only a fraction or maybe a smaller percentage that is a woman's plan A. That she's like probably not knowing what to do and try to think through her options at least. And I don't know. I guess I
Yeah.
can't
I
speak
mean,
to that.
the fewer options you have, the fewer options you have.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the church needs to be an option. Like
Yeah.
turning to the church and, turning to our care. I just am asking myself right now, where's the church?
And being in Oregon, we have to ask that question of ourselves less,
Mm.
which is unfortunate.
Why is that?
That we can't be more proactive. We aren't going to lose our right to choose here.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Not soon.
Well, yeah, it would take I think an act of, well, I won't say act of God because I don't think God is in that one, but it would
The act of Congress.
it would
Yeah.
no, yeah,
State
I don't
Congress.
know, yeah, act of state Congress to completely flip flop on everything, but yeah,
So when I think about this topic and I think about like the church being angry and upset and threatened and all these things, okay, what's a better response besides I wish that we could go back to the day when abortions were underground.
Right.
I wish that we could go back to the day when what day do we want to go back to on this topic? I think the day that we need to go to is the day forward.
mm-hmm.
And that's the progression of life. We need to follow the progression of life forward, not backward. So what is the third way? What's the kingdom way in this? Because the church's way has not been the kingdom way. Society's way really is never the kingdom way. So what's the kingdom way in this? I think needs to be answered.
That's a very
Heavy
big topic.
Very, very. But I just wanted to drop it in there like a bombshell.
It if you want to go big nostalgia, it was released today that Ben Franklin wrote a 40s article on how to perform an at-home abortion. So if you want our founding fathers' advice on Christian ethics of that, I think.
Wow.
There's some irony there.
Which I don't think we're going to be able to get to irony tonight.
No, but can we cover a little bit of cognitive dissonance?
Of course.
Yeah, I got that one, and I'm usually pretty brief.
Okay, go for it, Sharia.
So I'm going to start with the definition, and then we'll look at the scripture. Cognitive dissonance is defined as a state of tension that occurs when we hold two beliefs or ideas or attitudes or opinions that are psychologically inconsistent with each other. So, for example, I believe that the Bible is the only text we need to know about history. And also, I believe that there is no historical evidence that the Israelites were ever in Egypt.
Yeah.
What was your first statement?
That the Bible is the only document we need to know anything about history.
You don't believe that, Sharia?
I don't believe that. But if we find ourselves holding these two beliefs and discover that we can't, something's got to give. And that feeling that we're feeling is cognitive dissonance, when these two things don't work together. So let's look at that scripture. And then we'll talk a little bit about the feeling there. So this comes from Jeremiah 6:14.
I don't know
This
if
is a new
Rob
scripture,
has
yeah.
that one.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Does he?
Yeah.
Okay.
There it is. And it's talking about religious leaders in Jerusalem. It says, they treat the wound of my people as if it were nothing. All is well, they insist, when in fact nothing is well. So it's when you can see the Babylonians besieging your city and you're still trying to comfort people, saying everything's fine, everything's going to be okay. So when we're faced with cognitive dissonance, we have two options. We can either double down on what we have always believed and hold that belief even more tightly and stick our fingers in our ears and start yelling so that we don't have to hear anymore. Or we can follow the new information and see where it leads and let go of our previously held beliefs. That's hard to do. A lot of us opt to double down.
Yeah. So let me pose something to you, Sharia.
Okay.
Do you believe that we go through cognitive dissonance at every election cycle of a new president?
Oh, that's... Oof. I mean, I can give you my initial thoughts, and then I'm going to marinate on it for 36 hours, and I might arrive at a different conclusion.
Did Kevin create dissonance in you?
No, I'm just a marinator. I don't know what I think until it's sat in me for a while. Maybe. The last couple have just felt so uncertain anyways, that it was almost hard to know what to believe about what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it just brings out the dissonance that's already there.
Yeah. I definitely think we witnessed some this last election.
I think with the rise of polemic media, especially how hard it's going, and QAnon, but also the opposite of that. I'm not sure what the opposite of that is right now in my head. But there's some cognitive dissonance there.
When I was in high school, there was these student body elections, the SBA, Student Body Association or whatever, that they would elect a president for the senior class president. Mm-hmm. And that president would always run on a platform. And, you know, they had their little sites and they give their speeches and they go through the process. But it's along the lines they made promises that were never even able to be kept. Soda pop machines in every hallway. I remember that one.
It was the 80s. Are you sure that you didn't get them?
No. I mean, it was a school board decision.
So much for the good old days.
So much for the good old days. Yeah.
We have
cigarette machines were fine, and we could smoke in the back in this little courtyard. We could actually smoke, but soda pop machines in the hallway were not. They were not approved.
You could smoke.
Yeah, we had a smoking section in school. It was in the back. It's a little patio.
Did you bump cigarettes off the teachers or what?
Totally. So no, the teachers would go out there and smoke too with the students.
Yeah.
So there was always promises that couldn't be kept, right? I think that we've seen that in every election cycle. There's always promises
Yeah.
that maybe in a a midnight prayer, hope, and dream that it could be you know fulfilled, but it's impossible to fulfill some of these promises. So I think about like how you know George W. No new taxes. That's what he lost his
2 days later.
2 days. Yeah, 2 months he gets elected, and then doesn't get reelected because of that lie. No new taxes. I think
Was it
about
a
like
lie or
how
just
the
he
Iraqi
just had to,
war, or yeah, I don't know. It was something,
there's some
but it
dissonance there.
was like always a promise. Yeah, there's dissonant promise that is this going to happen? Is this going to actually occur? Um, I think about like the Iraqi and Afghanistan wars, how that was always a promise to get out of those wars, and how long it took to get out of those
Hmm.
wars it was always a promise. Hope and change. I'm not sure what hope and what change we actually got. We got
Looks much worse
some.
now.
Yeah, like what hope and change did we get? I think about build a wall. Did we get a wall? I don't think we got a full wall. We got some, but it's blowing down and kind of a failed project.
I'm never
Pipelines were
alone. That's it.
promised. Um, I think what Guantanamo Bay was supposed to be, shut down over and over and over again. So I mean, there's just promises made and not kept, and so then when those promises are not fulfilled, a couple years into the election or into office, I think that people enter into a form of cognitive dissonance, and it happens a lot with the party of the person. It's not the opposite party. They're not in cognitive dissonance. They think that the guy's or the gal's a quack job, running for office the whole time, even in office. But it's the party of the person. So the Democratic Party of Biden is in cognitive dissonance, or the Republican Party of Trump is in cognitive dissonance because things that
In
were promised were not fulfilled.
terms of what we think about the president.
Hmm. Yeah. Or what we think about the promises that were made.
Right. Because we can still, all of us, experience cognitive dissonance about what is happening in our life as community and as a nation
Right.
that isn't necessarily related to who's running it.
Right. So
Totally.
think about the Trump years, the good old days of the Trump years, where there was a lot of promises made, right? And things didn't happen quite the way that they were supposed to, quite opposite, probably, of the way that they were supposed um, to the point that he wasn't reelected. And now people are
If you
doubling
believe the
down.
count.
Mm,
uh, that's said in sarcasm. We never meant,
that's,
meant
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
total sarcasm. You can't joke like that, Jay. Cannot have a full joke. Um, and we get to the other side now, a couple years later, and people are doubling down.
Yeah.
Like they believe in him more. They want him more. Uh, Even though there were things that were definitely promises that were never even able to be fulfilled. So how could we, the promise of building a wall? How could we develop Space Force and not build a wall? That just doesn't make any sense to me. We can develop a whole new program, a whole new arm of the military, but we can't build a wall. That just seems like cognitive dissonance to me. That's where I'm going with this. And the same, you can say that, and I'm not picking on him because I know we have some believers in Trumpy, but but you think about Biden, you think about all of the presidents that have been elected, you think about what they promised and what they fulfilled. People enter into cognitive dissonance when it's all happening because what they promised is not being fulfilled. Whoever it is, could be anybody, Democrat, Republican, or even a congressman that you believe in, congresswoman, whoever it is. Well, on that depressing note.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
We
All
didn't
right.
even get to the doomsday cult.
We didn't get to the doomsday cult, did we? Dang it. Well, one day. Well, let's quickly, just paradox is actually the belief. You have two beliefs that actually don't necessarily contradict each other. You just can't reconcile them together. You can't figure out how to bring them together. The best example that I can have of paradox in that two related components is the Trinity and our belief in the Trinity. We live in paradox of the Trinity. And that's all we have. That's all we have time for. It's 9:55, so we need to shut it down. But hey, this was an engaging conversation. Thanks for having it with me. I appreciate both of you. The places we go when things aren't what they seem. Lots of emotion there. Lots of emotion. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. Have a good, wonderful rest of your week.
Gracious Father, we give you praise and thanks for this holy communion, the body and blood of your beloved Son. The body is broken, God's love poured open to make us new. Lord, make us new. Abba, Father, we bless your name and take part in this holy communion. Make us all one, to love like your Son. The body is broken, God's love poured open to make us new. Lord, make us new. The body is broken, God's love